area to the locations of Brother Thomas's house in Hoboken and his cemetery. That he was buried. He died in the wintertime, therefore he had to be put in a. They have a vault because in the wintertime you can't dig a grave. So we went to the vault, and then we went to the cemetery in Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn. But he was a most unusual man. Plus, he had a phenomenal memory. Now, Brother John Thomas married his wife knowing that he had tuberculosis. You just have to, this is good foundation for a prophecy. He married his wife because she had tuberculosis, but he felt that he was the best qualified to take care of his wife. He was a doctor. So most of his life, he was dealing with problems of tuberculosis. In fact, throughout his life, he always had problems with physical energy left. And he was disfellowshipped by the Millerites in 1848. And he attended, there was a conference being held in Scotland. Now, Scotland is not a warm place. It's cold, it's drafty, it's windy. But he managed to attend that conference in Scotland, and a small ecclesia in Scotland. He was permitted to speak and address the community in Scotland. And when he got back to England, he was utterly exhausted. So he spent 3 months recuperating at a brother's house in London. And in those 3 months, now mind you, 3 months, without his library around us, when we write, I write, okay, I got a few books. I look at the books and I copy and I gather and I put together. But he had no library. He was recuperating from a serious illness, and within 3 months, he wrote Elpis Israel, all by memory. That's the phenomenal memory that John Thomas has. He has to be respected for what he acquired. And that's saying, that's quite a bit. Now, Brother Thomas's prophetic opinion was that the harlot of Revelation 17 was the papacy. And that the latter-day Assyrian was Gog or Russia. Now, there's a difference between the latter-day Assyrian and Russia and Gog. And here's the difference. In the book of Daniel, in the 2nd chapter, we have Daniel's metallic image, a head of gold, silver, all the metals, and then the stone cut out of the mountain without hands and smote the image and the feet. Now, in the 7th chapter of Daniel, we have a lion, a winged lion and then we're told that the wings were plucked off, and then a man's heart was given to this lion, and he was made to stand as a man. Now, that's the difference between the Assyrian Empire and the Babylonian Empire. They were basically, the winged lion was the Assyrian Empire. When its wings were plucked off and given a heart and made to stand as a man, that was the Babylon, and was stand as a man was the Babylonian. History identifies, did I say that right?
I think so.
Yeah, okay, I said it right. The winged lion was the Assyrian Empire, right? And then when the lion stands up as a man, that's the Babylonian Empire. History identifies these two empires as the first and second Chaldean Empire. They were so close in ideologies. They had the same religion. They spoke the same language. They had their capital city on the same river. Here's the capital of Nineveh was the Assyrian Empire, which arose first, and then Babylon, which was down here, and there's only about 300-400 miles separates them. And this was what's known as the Fertile Crescent. And Nineveh arose first and would come down this area into Sinai and fight Egypt. Egypt would come up and fight Nineveh, and then Babylon would come up and fight Egypt, and Egypt would fight Babylon. Oftentimes they met in this area here. So this is how, and right in the middle was Israel, and Israel has always been in that middle area. Brother Thomas's prophetic opinion consequently required that Russia must first conquer Rome before Gog invades Jerusalem. That's important because thou art this head of gold. So before any prophecy, before we have an imminent return of Christ, that power has to conquer Rome before it can invade Jerusalem. That second advent occurred in Brother Thomas's opinion. The second advent would occur in 1868. However, Brother Thomas died in 1871 because of tuberculosis disease. Now, all of Brother Thomas's dates, though very logical, and I'll tell you, I assure you, they are logical. I mean, if you follow his dates, extremely logical, but they never came to fruition. Somebody say, any questions? No? Okay.
Somebody has something going in the background and keeps keep hearing.
Oh, okay.
I don't know who it is.
I'll just ignore. Okay. Brother, he stated that his biggest prophetic problem was understanding Micah 7:16. Now, in Micah 7:16 has, the nation shall see and be confounded at all their might. That is the state of Israel. They, the nations of this world, shall lay their hands upon their mouth, their ears shall be deaf. Now, Brother Thomas saw quite a picture for the state of Israel. Now, mind you, he died in 1871, and he predicted Christ's return in 1868. Now, in 1867, just a couple of years after the prediction of John Thomas, Mark Twain visited Israel, the Jerusalem area, and wrote that everything was brown, dirty, filthy. Who would ever want to live in this land? And that's that. And yet, John Thomas had the vision to foresee, and that's why Micah 7.
I'm just calling you to mute yourself because I hear the background, something in the background.
Here is Tel Aviv.
That's what I'm looking at. Oh, I saw yours was unmuted, so I'm trying to see everybody else.
You got a comment, Dan? Hi, Samuel.
Joe?
Yeah.
Before you go any further, whoever is muted, mute yourselves because that's where the feedback's coming from. There's a half a dozen that are staying open mic, and you're hearing whatever is in the background. So whoever is not muted, mute yourself so you don't get the feedback. Otherwise, it's getting a lot of garble noise.
So I should mute myself? Is that what you're saying?
Everyone else that's listening.
Oh, everyone else that's listening should mute themselves. And if you want to say something, click there's a button on the bottom, and your hand comes up, and you get pushed up to the front of the video so I could see you. Okay, so here was Tel Aviv in 1909. This is the hill, Tel Aviv, 1909. Now keep in mind, in 1868-7, Mark Twain says it's a brown, dirty, filthy. Who would ever want to live in Jerusalem? Here is a picture of Tel Aviv today. about 100 years later. And today, this is what Israel looks like. This is a picture put out by a company that's selling real estate in Israel. If you want to buy a home in Israel, you buy a lot over here, and this is what you have. There is the enormous transformation from what it was in 1867 when Brother John Thomas was writing about Israel and what it is today. Now, we read in Daniel 12:4, but thou, O Daniel, shut up the book, the words, and seal the book. That's the book of Daniel, even until the time of the end, which we suggest was World War I, 1914 to 1918. So no matter how much John Thomas tried, and he did a wonderful job, the book was sealed. And that's why none of his dates came out into fruition. And that's why a good portion of what he had to say doesn't exactly fit today in today's prophecy. Now, I came across a book called The Time of the End in relation to the Millennial Week. The Millennial Week was God's 6,000 years for this earth. The 7,000 years is the kingdom of God on earth. Now, this is what W.L. Curtis from Worcester, Mass. Now, I don't, that name sounds familiar to me, but I wasn't too sure. Samuel, do you remember anything about this name, Curtis? Oh, well, anyway, I have to check with Sam Swift. This is what he said. Most significantly, not only because they give certainty as to the end of the sixth day, the 6,000 years of the millenniary week, but because they indicate that the termini of the other line of dates, which indicates the time of that period, the time of the end. So he recognized that the time of the end must terminate, and it has been concealed in all past generations. That's why past generations, until we get up to the First World War, nobody really had a really solid understanding on prophecy. Brother Curtis concluded that the time of the end terminated in 1910, which was pretty close to 1914, and by 1955, the kingdom would be fully established. Well, so be it for that date. All of the dates within the book of Daniel began to be unsealed, starting with World War I, the first woe. The second woe was World War II, 1939 to 1945, and the third woe will be World War III, Armageddon. That's my suggestion. Now, I want to go back to the Crimean War. It it was a small war, insignificant, didn't amount to much, but it occurred in 1853 through 1856. Now, 1853 was only 3 years after Brother Roberts had distributed his Elpis Israel. He wrote it in 3 months in 1848, took a year to revise it, 49, and in 1850 he was able to distribute it. So that's a good date for the distribution of Elpis Israel, 1850, right in the middle of the century. Now, it was in 1853, Brother Thomas was he was telling events that would occur from scriptures almost up to date. And he was, and people were astonished at what he had to say. The Crimean War was a war between Russia and the Ottoman Empire, who at that time was known as, in Western newspapers, as the sick man of Europe. Now, here is a picture of the Crimean Peninsula, and this is the battle over the Crimean War from 1853 to 1856. Russia started it with a land invasion in what is today Bulgaria and Hungary. And surprisingly, the Turks defeated the Russians at this point. Now, that was a major defeat for the opinion of Brother Thomas. And now, for many, this was now what the thing about the Crimean War of 1853, though, it was the first major war that was published worldwide with the invention of the wireless telegraph. And that's what it was blown way out of proportions to its size. Almost every newspaper in Europe, in England, and America, front page, you always read about the Crimean War simply because of the wireless telegraph. Photographs were sent, artists were sent there to draw pictures, and it was like a major world war, but it was really a small little war. The war was started by Russia against the Ottoman Empire, and Russia claimed that the Turks were mistreating the rights of the Christians in the Holy Land. Russia started the war in a land battle around what is now Romania and Bulgaria. Russia is defeated. Now, that should have been the end of it. Once Russia is defeated, it's defeated. But still, Brother Thomas held on to something. Russia then sends her navy against Constantinople, the capital of the empire. With the Turks' approval, a united naval force of England and France defeated the Russian Navy in the Black Sea. Russia and France didn't want Russian Navy to come out of the Black Sea. They wanted to keep it bottled up because they wanted control of the maritime areas. So again, Russia is defeated in the Black Sea, and Russia's Navy defeated, and Russia sues for peace. And that's the end of the Crimean War. Brother Thomas' suggestion, and he persisted in this, would be that Russia would be victorious over the sick man of Europe, the Turks. That Russia, after taking Bulgaria, would continue her victorious march into Western Europe, even taking the Vatican. By conquering Rome, Russia becomes a symbolic head of gold, thus producing an imminent second advent. In order to have the stone cut out of the mountain without hands hit the image in the feet, somebody has to be the head of gold. And according to John Thomas, since the papacy is the head of Daniel's metallic image, Russia becomes the head of gold when it conquers and occupies Rome. All prophetic views, in order to have an imminent return of Christ, that is the second advent, they must first occupy and become the Babylonian head of gold. Doesn't matter if it's Harry Whitaker's views or John Thomas's views. Whoever you nominate, must become the head of gold. This is why, according to the traditional view, Gog, prior to her invasion of Israel, must first occupy Rome. According to Brother Harry Whitaker, who believed in the, quote, literal interpretation of Revelations, which is also known as the futurist interpretation, was that whoever occupies the literal city of ancient Babylon becomes the head of gold. Again, the same principle. Consequently, I got this one chart here. Now, the first nominee for the Islamic interpretation was that Saddam Hussein, military leader of Iraq. In the late 70s, Saddam Hussein of Iraq had the largest military army ever assembled in the Middle East, 1 million men. He also undertook to rebuild the ancient city of Babylon as a tourist attraction. And therefore he was nominated, he was by the literalists nominated as Daniel's head of gold. That would unite that, and Saddam, Brother Whitaker expected that this Saddam Hussein would unite all of the Islamic forces that come to fight against Jerusalem. Well, he did start a war, except instead of fighting against Jerusalem, he invaded Kuwait for the money that they had. Well, that was the, let me see, I'm at 115. Saddam Hussein was hanged in 2006. That's the end of that opinion. However, the futurists got a second chance with Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, a radical Islamic leader who was a spin-off of Osama bin Laden when he created ISIS. He controlled the ancient city of Babylon. Abu, in 2014, self-proclaimed himself the caliphate of all Islam and thereby created ISIS. Now that's, at this point, the internet simply went wild. I mean, it was full of it. I mean, just look at some, and I've only cut out a few of them, but there's, the internet is a Wild West place where anything goes. And the better the graphics, the better you're acceptable. And they have some really good graphics on prophecy. So one must be very careful about what you read on the internet. On October 27, 2019, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi killed himself by detonating a suicide vest during the Barasha raid conducted by the United States following the approval from President Donald Trump in Syria's northwest Idlib province, Wikipedia. So there was a second chance and went down the tubes. Now, before we leave this introduction section, we would like to say something about the present nation's military capability. You know, when we talk about military capabilities, we talk about what one nation will do to another nation. We have to stay within the realm of who has what power. If you don't have the power, how can you conquer a nation or say that this nation will do this to that nation if you don't have the capable military power? Now, here is a picture. Anybody know what this is? Take a chance.
Looks like a bullet going through another bullet.
Precisely. This is a bullet found during World War II. Pure accident. You couldn't duplicate this in a trillion years if you tried. But this is one bullet being hit by another bullet. Now, that's the kind of technology that some of today's military powers have. We'll say a little bit more about this. Now, when we talk about military technology, there's the old technology and then there's the new technology. This is the new 21st century technology, where man can intersect another bullet with a bullet flying at faster speeds. That's what some nations have today. And the only nation capable of doing this today is the United States and Israel. Now, let's talk about tanks. I want to spend some time with tanks because during the Second World War, Churchill believed that the the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And during Second World War, when Hitler declared war on Russia, Churchill, without going to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he went and made a secret meeting with the Russians. And he brought with him the blueprints of the best rotary motor engine in the world at that time, the Merlin engine. It was a powerful engine, and that's what won the war, the battle over Britain, the Merlin engine. And he gave it to the Russians, hoping that they would slow down the Germans. And of course, the Russians were delighted to get that engine. So they put it into their tank, and they had a tank with that engine that had enough power to drive what is known as the T-series tanks. The T-series. And basically today, Russia is still developing their T-series tanks. They're 3-man tanks. And while the bore of the tank has increased to some degree, it is still basically World War II technology. Now, this is a 3-man tank. And often they had on the back here a reserve. That's where the gasoline tank was. And if you hit that gas tank, it'll blow up that tank. But during World War II, it was good enough to stop the Germans. And let's see what else I want to say. And also they also put the same Merlin engine into their airplanes and made it as powerful as any of the German airplanes. Now we come to the Abrams tank. Now, before there was the Abrams tank, there was the Sherman tank of World War II. There was 50,000 Sherman tanks produced for World War II. On average, they lost 3 tanks to every 1 German tank. They weren't very good. They only had a 30 millimeter rifle, a bore on their main gun, and this was a 5-inch bore main gun. So during Second World War, everybody was afraid that Russia would come down from the north, invade Europe with its tanks, and take over the entire European community. Well, time went on, and America developed their Abrams tank. Now, the Abrams tank is a 4-man crew tank, whereas the Russian is a 3-man crew. And here's what the difference between a 4-man crew and a 3-man crew tank. I'll demonstrate it if I can. Yeah, okay, I can do it. This is an Abrams tank. The bottom is going up and down, but the top, the gun, remains fixed. It doesn't move. The top is fixed, electronically fixed on its target. It doesn't move, regardless of whether the tank is going up and down. You don't have to aim it. It's already targeted electronically. And they don't have to, this tank, you have to stop, rotate, aim, shoot, see how close you came, take a second shot, and try then. So before you hit something with this tank, unless you were real close, you take about 2-3 shots. Where this tank here, the Abrams 4-man crew, 1 shot, 1 hit, 1 time. And that's the Abrams 4-man tank. That's the kind of technology that America has developed. America spends, and has spent since World War II, half of the world's military budget on technology. you could take whatever the world spends, and it's only half compared to what the United States spends. So United States has always spent more on military technology than any other nation. And this is the kind of technology that America has today. This is the helmet of the F-35 jet fighter, which is the third generation from the best that Russia has. In other words, Russia has an airplane, one here, then two, then three. This is the third generation above, and with this helmet, they could see not only above, they could see below, they could see to the left, they could see to the right. And all they have to do to target their enemy is to look with their eye. And where their eye goes, that's where the munitions will go. Now that's phenomenal. Now, you know, when I was younger, Harold Lafferty and Ian Finley, three of us went down to Washington, went down to Memorial Museum, and we visited the Smithsonian Institute. And much to my surprise, there was a what do you call this? This was the Blackbird. There was a Blackbird plane, and the man says there that they retired the Blackbird plane. And I said to myself, why in the world would you retire such a phenomenal plane? Well, the only reason you retire such a phenomenal plane is because you got something much, much better. That's why you retire it. And this is the SR-71, and this is the SR-72. And they retired the SR-71 because they got the SR-72, which goes almost twice as fast and goes up into the ionosphere. So nobody gives up, retires something. I mean, if you were to put two cannons in here, you could destroy no jet could keep up with the Blackbird. You could defeat any aircraft in the world. So that shows you how advanced the United States was. The Blackbird was retired in 1990. We're talking about military technology now. Now, this is a picture of an American aircraft carrier, and it's called a carrier group. Now, I counted the planes, the ships here, and I counted 42 ships. Now, nobody knows how many ships are underneath, how many submarines they have. They're not going to tell you anything. Now, I assure you, Russia has nothing, nowhere, anywhere near this. And America has 12, I repeat, 12 of these carrier groups. You talk about power. Now, let's go a little further. Here is the modern USS General Ford aircraft carrier. It's the S class. You see any smoke coming out of here? No. Why? It's atomic powered. Here is the one, well, Russia had one aircraft carrier. She was building a second one. And these are just copies of the British aircraft carrier. And she was building a second one, and she sold one to China. So China has one of these. Now you notice this here, what this here is? What do you think this is? Diesel power, right? This is World War II technology. The aircraft carrier is run by diesel engine. This is World War II technology. This is technology of the future. Now, America has never sold any of its aircraft carriers to anybody because they're still considered top secret in how they are constructed. They are almost sink proof. I say almost, because you never, nothing's positive nowadays, but we'll go into it a little bit more. And here is uh, Russian aircraft in the Crimean airport, dry dock. And what's happening is the dry dock is deteriorated and no longer is in service. So the Russian aircraft carrier can no longer be serviced right now. We don't know how long it's going to be, but that's the way it is. Now, when we talk about military technology, this is the kind of ships that America is building today. This is a destroyer. Totally different from what you normally see. I won't bother to go into it. This is a coastal ship for protecting our coast. This is a Virginia class submarine. This submarine has been known to tailgate Russian submarines for days, and they never suspected that they were being followed. Now this here is a fantastic invention. In the Second World War, they would have every sixth round would be a tracer bullet. The bullet would shoot out and leave a tracer trail so that they would know, the shooter would know how far he was from the target. However, now, with the technology that they have today, and I believe America is the only one that has this. I can't be sure because a lot of this stuff is military secrets, you just read about them, Anyway, every sixth round that is sent out from a Gatling gun, this is no longer a single bullet. See, a machine gun, what happens with the machine gun, the single barrel gets so hot that it melts and misfires. So they now have a Gatling gun that rotates the barrel. They have anywhere from 3 to 6 barrels, depending. And every sixth round, the bullet that is sent out electronically sends back a signal to the home base, and it tells the home base how far apart he is from hitting the target. And then the home base can adjust the the barrel of the gun to ensure that what is coming out of the gun will hit the target before it even comes near a ship. So that's the kind of technology. And all of this technology is interwoven, and it's real-time technology, which any qualified person in the military can have access to. Now, Brother John Thomas says that Britain and Russia were natural antagonistic. They were mutually aggressive, antagonistic empires, like vinegar and oil. But yet, here we have the Russian aircraft carrier, which is the same aircraft carrier as the British had. They just simply, I'll say one thing, British intelligence was very weak about keeping its secrets. Russia, British intelligence was superb in discovering the secrets of the Germans. But when it came to keeping its own secrets, it did a poor job. And Russian intelligence infiltrated British intelligence as much as British intelligence intercepted British intelligence during the Second World War. And consequently, they got all of their drawings and blueprints and so forth from British aircraft carrier, and they built their own. Now, Russia has never, I don't think there is one unique military invention that they ever invented. Everything was copied through sabotage. Anyway, here, I forgot what, I think this was during I forgot when it was, but the Russian aircraft carrier had to go through the English Channel down around here and into the Mediterranean Sea. Now, if Russia and Britain were natural antagonists, why would why wouldn't Russia why wouldn't Britain destroy the Russian sole aircraft carrier? They could easily have done so within the English Channel, but she was allowed to go free. In addition, I think I spoke about this before, didn't I? All right, anyway, well, if you don't remember, it says angels don't play this harp. Now, HARP stands for High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. Now, this is all hush hush, and unless you have this book, you would never know about it. You never read about it, nothing. HARP's capability, it's a land-based series of strong antennas. There's about 50. I saw a picture once. I only saw it once in my lifetime on the History Channel, Military Channel, placed in a rectangular pattern that are individually controlled to unite at a specific location. It's like forming an upside down cone. Usually when you send a signal, it goes out and it spreads out. Where this system, you have 50 cones, 50 antennas, and they come in to a single point up in the ionosphere. This cone point can reach the ionosphere and beyond, and is capable of sending and receiving electronic data. Today, they are primarily used for communications with submarines. Now, here's how they work. Here's the antenna array. You have an operating station, which usually is underground, it's not above ground. And the cones send up a signal into the ionosphere. And then from that ionosphere, they could bounce a signal back here. They could hit an airplane down here. They can go over the horizon. And they can also, what this does, they can also, like, it's also sends out a signal at a microwave level that heats up things. So when you send a microwave signal, you could burn up an airplane, you could heat up the sky, and so forth. Now, HARP, with a mirror or a satellite, they can superheat any portion of the Earth. That's phenomenal. That's 21st century technology. Let me move up some more. They can detect the firing of any missile worldwide. Well, this one here. They can detect if it is armed with a nuclear weapon. They don't have to know they know what's in the missile, you know? So if it doesn't have a nuclear weapon, well, you know, so forth. And with the proper cloud vapor location, drastically change the weather pattern to produce hurricanes, monsoons, anywhere on the planet. Think about that. That's power. And there's a lot of speculation of, you know, some of these major hurricanes that come through. One or two of them have been associated with this here. I won't, that's speculation, so I'm not gonna. But this HARP system does have that capability. What they do is you ever seen these long clouds at a jet that's going up high in the sky and there's a cloud trail? And sometimes these cloud trails, they'll last for, you know, maybe half a day or so, and then they fade out. But some observers have noticed that some of these contrails last for 2 and 3 days. Now, why is that? It's because of HARP. HARP seeds these cloud trails, And then they use these cloud contrails to reflect wherever they want to reflect on whatever location they want. That's military technology. And this is all integrated through a high computer system. America's integrated computer power is literally beyond imagination. Russia has nothing like this. Neither has Britain, for that matter. Israel has some of it. And this is what it can do. Every general, every ship, every airplane, every tank, every soldier has instant access to real-time digital information necessary to achieve success on his battleground. And it's all integrated through huge, huge computer power. So before we go on, is there any question in this category of military power? So before we have before we say who can do what to what country, think about the necessary military power that is necessary for what you want to say.
I'd just like to make one comment.
Yes, Dan, go ahead.
Regardless of how much power a nation has, is it willing to use it is the question. So that's for example, Russia has military might. They have nuclear weapons. Now, no one wants to start a nuclear war, but if they happen, just for example, happen to lob something over to, let's say, just to Israel, let's say, whatever, because we know that's where they're heading, will the United States get into a world war with Russia and wind up destroying, having half of its nation destroyed for Israel's sake? I'm just saying that regardless of military might, I think the willingness.
No, Dan, I'll say this.
The willingness.
No individual nation can start a world war.
No, but I'm just saying, Joe, that regardless of the might, the willingness to use it is the question. And we can't answer that. We won't know that answer.
Well, if you go back in history, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, Cuba and Castro tested the United States. Kennedy put his foot down. What did Russia do?
No, they backed down.
Because they couldn't compete with American technology. This guy over in North Korea, he's just another Castro, and Trump put him right in his place, and he said, my stick is bigger than your stick. So even if they tried to start something, the military might of America is so phenomenal, so large, that it could quench any nation without batting an eye. That's how, and they could be almost certain that very little reaction will fall because of that. You're not going to start no nation is going to start a World War III. World War III will start when all nations are gathered together. There has to be something that unifies all nations, which I believe is the United Nations. It is only when the United Nations are gathered together against Jerusalem that you will have World War III. One nation will not start World War III independent of another nation. That's not the way it's going to work. They're going to have a coalition of nations through a United Nations resolution. That's what will bring about World War III. And it's the American military might that's preventing any kind of major eruption in war. That's my opinion. Anybody else? Wait, I don't see any hands. Do you have any hands, Dan?
I don't see anything.
You don't see any hands?
I don't have that. I don't have that ability. I don't see.
My
computer,
not there?
for some reason, I can't raise a hand on mine either. I don't know how it works.
Okay. It's 8:32. So an hour's passed.
Oh, I thought we were going to get into some of the problem verses.
Well, I had to lay this foundation, and I hope that I made the point that regardless of what prophetic view you understand, whether it's ancient Babylon or literal Babylon, Revelation 17, they must first control Babylon. And once they control Babylon, either the literal ancient city of Babylon or Revelation 17, the harlot of Rome, once they control Rome, then you have the stage set for an imminent return of Christ. All right, well then next week, I didn't make it, Dan. I have to go another verse. Next week, we'll start with the third prophetic verse problem, which is Jeremiah 37-10. And that is, we'll just read it. For thus saith the Lord, we have heard a voice of trembling and of fear and not of peace. Ask ye now and see whether a man doth travail with child. Wherefore do I see every man with his hands on his loins as a woman in travail, and all faces are turned into paleness. Alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it in it. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it. For it shall come to pass in that day, saith the Lord of hosts, that I will break his yoke from off thy neck, and will burst thy bonds, and strangers shall no more serve themselves of him. So that's the next problem verse. I think. Well, that's it. We'll take. That's the problem verses. When is Jacob's time of fear? Did it happen in the past, or will it happen in the future? Both the traditional view and the Islamic perspective say that it will happen in the future with the 2/3 destruction of Israel. And we'll address that next week. Any questions or
That's good. That's our homework.
what was that, Dan?
So that's our homework. We'll
Yeah,
look
do
at,
your homework on
Jer-
it. That's the verse that's all right.
Jeremiah
All right,
37.
let's close with a prayer. Phil White, close with a prayer.
Heavenly Father, we bow before you now to thank you for the blessing that we have today of meeting together, looking at your words of truth and understanding that you have a plan and purpose with the nations. You have a plan and purpose with us. You have a plan and purpose with the apple of your eye, children of Israel. Father, though you have the angels working throughout the globe with these nations, and we know there's coming a day when your plan will be set in motion. Jesus will come back to this earth. And we ask that you help us to prepare for that day, to be ready, to be praying, to be watching, to be attending classes like this so we may be more aware of what's happening in the world and through our scriptures. Help us to help each other, maintain our faith in these last days. Help us to be fruitful servants working in your vineyard. And we ask that you send your son back soon, Father. We're waiting. We think we're ready. We're preparing our houses. Our house is in order, but we always need your help. Guide and direct us always. Be with those that need you now, whether it be sick in body or mind or in spirit. Help us all to be ready for the return of Jesus. We ask this prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Yeah, I guess you could all unmute now. It's okay.
We could all unmute now. Let me see. 142.
Just unshare your screen, Joe.
Unshare. Stop share. Okay.
There it is. There it is.
I cut my slides out.
Yep. No, it's good. It's good. All right. I couldn't tell how many were on YouTube, but the YouTube thing came up, so a lot of people listen on YouTube. I don't know how that works.
I probably have enough for another 1.5 classes. So who's ever scheduled to speak, give them 2 weeks.
Okay, I gotta go through the list and see who's up. All right, good. So 1.5 weeks?
Well, I'll stretch it to 2.
Especially, I was gonna say, how do you do that? All right,
No, I'm counting by the number of slides that I have left, Jan.
okay,
I got about 200
Have
slides.
a short class, that's all.
what's that?
Huh? On the floor.
What do you want?
You gotta put it when you wash the floor.
I hear some talk. Sam, are you in Florida now?
Now I leave Friday.
Oh.
So Joe, there's 4 verses left. 'Cause I know when you started off on the first class, you said you had 6 verses. So we didn't cover any tonight, but was there 4 verses left?
2 verses left.
So
But
you
the
covered
last-
4.
Well, actually, the last 2 verses are just 2 little things. It'll be easy to cover. They're not problem verses like this. There's only one more problem verse like this, which is 4th and 5th problem verses. Yeah, I did 3 problem verses, 2 problem verses. We're gonna do maybe I'll take two more weeks. I got 2 more weeks, Samuel.
Okay, all right, just so we know, I'll
Yeah, I
if
have.
can't-
I have Jacob's time of trouble, which is next week. Then the week after, we're going to go Moab, be thou a covert or a protector for Israel. And then the 5th problem verse is the second time in Ezekiel 11. I'm sorry, Isaiah 11:11.
No, your space is empty.
So I guess I will go for another 2 weeks.
Okay. All right, so Isaiah 11:11, what was the other verse, Joe?
Let's see. The 3rd verse will be Jeremiah 30:6-10, Jacob's time of trouble. The 4th problem verse is Isaiah 16:4, Moab, be thou a covert for Israel, a protector.
Got it.
And then the 5th problem verse is Isaiah 11:11, the second time.
Okay,
These verses should go fairly rapidly. They're not as involved as the previous 2 verses. And then I have problem verse 6 and 7, but they're really problem verses for the 2 major opinions. Both of them have a problem with them that I've found that doesn't agree with what they say. So the last 2 verses are in a category by themselves. They're just verses that go contrary to the general opinion as understood by students. But they cannot be ignored in our interpretation of prophecy.
right.
So
Don't need it yet.
What?
No, she's talking to me, Dan.
Oh. All right. I got home late, so I'm signing off tonight. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
okay, John
Yep.
Thomas, good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
See, how do you sign off?
It says leave meeting somewhere. Bottom
Yeah,
right.
you
says
tap
leave
the
meeting.
top of the screen. Mine's on top.
Oh, mine's on the bottom. See, that's really a little different.